you. For all of the above that I'm never letting get near you. But still in all, give you every advantage I found. Couldn't find a better fit for them, along with my crown. And since the baton was passed, I've been down. Cause failing's not an option, and dad is not a noun, not at all.
Welcome to another episode of Dad is Not a Noun. My name is Ishmael, changing the narrative from the color of fatherhood, as well as changing the narrative on the things I care about. And today, I have another special guest with me. She wrote an amazing children book, as well as she has a podcast. Danny Oliver. She has a children book called Unschool Discoveries, a whimsical story about unschooled mixed heritage characters who enjoyed the adventure and nature learning together. She wrote the book in hope that her story would be a getaway to many and many more adventures of unique beings and having undocumented human experience. And I'm truly honored to have her on. Danny Oliver, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Ishmael. It's a pleasure.
No, thank you for coming on. Um, my next question I ask all my guests who comes on the show is this is like the pillar when we get into the conversation. How's your heart? Because again, I'm a big fan of mental health.
Ooh, that is a heavy question. This weekend I got to spend an incredible amount of one-on-one time with my partner, and it actually helped me to exercise some things from my teenage years and my young adulthood that I've been holding on to. And that coupled with therapy, I'm just so glad and happy and full and grateful that that has come up and out, and that I've received affirmations from my partner that we are truly in this life together by choice and not by coercion. And so today my heart is full and grateful. Thank you.
No, thank you. And just talk about the power, because May is Mental Health Awareness Month. Just talk about the impact of therapy for you as a Black woman. You got so much against you, from left, right, but just talk about the impact of therapy for you and your partner.
Whew. So I've been in therapy since I was about 16 years old. And for many, many years, therapy was just talk. It was either clinical, drugs, or someone just saying, you'll get over it. It was never anything that actually really got to the heart of what was going on with me from a neuroscience perspective. And during 2020, I started EMDR therapy. And that therapy is not talk therapy, it's based in neuroscience. And it addresses what's going on with our brain and how we can hold on to different memories and hold on to trauma, be it emotional or within our physical bodies. And that has literally set me free from a lot of what I had been dealing with since I was a teenager. So 16 years of talk therapy did nothing, but 16 sessions of EMDR has absolutely changed my life. At the end of 2020, I was at a point where talking about things in the industries that I worked in, which were male dominated, be it beer or technology, if you spoke a word to me, I would break down in absolute tears. I was immobile. I was having nightmares, having nervous breakdowns. And now I can interact with the world, interact and talk about those things and not be triggered. And it's just because I had to learn how to reparent myself, listen to my inner children and give them what they needed. And that is not something that we're taught growing up, for at least for our generation, right? We were not taught to look internally and to address ourselves. As a person who with a Caribbean background, we were taught move on, move on, move on, just do what you got to do. And we never took the time to look at what was making a person crack up or break down. We just kind of stepped over them and kept it moving. And I was one of those who could have been stepped over. But my partner was like, nope, this is a therapy that we're going to do. You're going to take it seriously. And whenever something comes up, we're going back to that. So therapy is absolutely important once you find the right kind of therapy for what you're going through. And for those going through trauma or experiencing post-traumatic stress syndrome, it doesn't just come from being in a war with guns. It also comes from being a person of color living in the US. Seek it because it will change your life.
Definitely, I agree with that. And going back to your book, Unschool Discoveries, I think also it kind of breaks down that ideology of parenting. Because as you're a parent, it kind of your book kind of changes the philosophy of being a parent. And I want to recite a quote. It's not a quote, but it's actually a poem. But I'm just going to take a little bit from the poem from Khalil Gibran. He's like one of my favorite poets of all time. Um, and in the poem, he says, "Your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life longing for itself. They come through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, yet they belong not to you. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts." And I want to leave it like that. And what are your thoughts about that? Because I think that's a critical piece is that you can give them your love, but not your thoughts.
It's a powerful quote from that poem because as a person growing up, again, Caribbean background, a people who suffered through colonialism, that was what our parents tried to do. They tried to give us their thoughts. They tried to give their experiences. Everything was about assimilation. Do as I say, do. Build your life based on our experiences. And there was never room for the change of environment, for the change in the times. And it disallowed our parents to connect with us because they weren't trying to get into that individual longing for life itself, like the poem says. They were just trying to imprint their exact thoughts, their exact mannerisms, their exact behaviors into this vessel that was experiencing its own things. And those two things were always, always in battle. And so when they sent us out into the world to go to school or to interact with people or didn't want to talk to us about certain things because they were embarrassed by it or they felt shame from it, it only pushed us children further into trouble because there was that just be like me and life will not be different without the understanding of I'm interacting with the world in a different way than you. And I think that parents today are looking for different ways. They're they're looking at their children as whole people and not these little beings that they own or control anymore. And I think it's making for even more wonderful people than we could have hoped for.
Definitely. And I love reading your bio when you say the undocumented human experience because in this social media age, everything is so documented. We 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 will record it and post it on social media, but just talk about the impact of that undocumented human experience in that child experience.
Mhm. It's interesting that you bring up social media because I don't even really feel all the time that like social media really documents life,
Mm,
especially in the forms that it's taken on today, where it's just advertising, right? It's free, cheap advertising for this brand or the other brand using someone else's voice to say you should buy a thing.
yeah,
Undocumented experiences are the things that we go through as people that there is no book for, there is no story for, there is no wisdom or collection of wisdom that we can refer to and say, how do I handle X situation? Or what did other people do when they faced this situation, right? We have Hollywood. Hollywood is a formula, the beat sheet. You do a thing, you encounter a thing, you have a problem, you overcome, you have the magic, and then life is great. Guy gets the girl, right? Like that's not real life. So, what we are going through, these are real stories, these are real experiences that people are having that have unformulaic twists and turns. And there's never a moment for a resolution, right? This is why therapy is so important. We never really have real moments for resolutions or real moments for reflection. And that creates in a person a world of experiences that they don't know really what they're going through. I don't know if I'm getting too deep here, but
No, no, no. This is
for
perfect.
me, when it comes to like reparenting myself and at the same time being a facilitator as a parent or parental figure for my kids, it's about allowing room to like check yourself and say like this thing really actually happened and taking that in. And that is not how we were trained in a school system or with schoolishness, where it was do a thing, do a thing, do a thing, do a thing, and then keep moving. You're expected to continue to move on. For instance, with schools and tests, right? You go to school, they teach you something, then they test you. You don't really know it quite well. But then what was the point? They never assess what you don't know. They never help you to overcome your shortcomings. It's just move on to the next chapter, move on to the next grade. You're never really getting that time to become a whole person or to become fully educated, because no one is addressing the issues or the battles that you overcome so that you can take a moment and learn from it and grow. We're just kind of being, force fed
Right.
and then pushed along. And I feel like from a perspective of stories, of documentation, of living real life, this can really hurt the human being, because we never know where we're at. We're just kind of spinning out of control when we don't take time and look at what we're going through and document them and talk about them and engage with them. I hope that makes
Yeah.
sense.
No, no, it definitely does. But also, like, get into it because I want to go into that rabbit hole because I think it's important. Because I think you put up a key word, reparenting. Um, I love that word because you dealt with trauma growing up and things like that, and therapy played a major role. But just talk about that impact for you personally when it comes to just reparenting and adjusting and not put that trauma that you had as a child, um, as a teenager, and pour it into your child.
Mm. Oh gosh. Oh. Ooh. How do I even begin to address this? So my mother did not have her mother. And she could say to me that I'll never know what that's like because she was present.
Okay.
But my mother was never present
Mm,
because my mother was always trapped. And my therapist warns me not to use the word always. But in my mother's case and the trauma that I experienced, my mother was always not present. Coupled with that, my father not always physically being present, not because he was a deadbeat dad. We lived with him, he lived with us. He was absolutely a present parent, but he lived his life in a way that wasn't your TV father,
right.
you know, the father who goes to work and comes home and
Right.
then is there all the time when you need him. It wasn't that. Um, so when it comes to reparenting, my mother was stuck as that 3-year-old child whose mom left her.
Mm,
And even though she became a 30-year-old person, a 40-year-old person, she would always go back to reacting to us the way she would react as a 3-year-old, as a 5-year-old, as a 13-year-old, in need of something, experiencing the trauma over and over. And there were times when I was 5 years old, 6 years old, when I was 10 and 15, that I needed my parents, that I needed to talk to somebody about something, or they would react to me in a very stern and strong way that dismissed me completely. And those parts of our person, those parts of our psyche, they are sort of like trapped in time, always experiencing these feelings and these emotions over and over and over again. And that gets trapped in your body. And when things familiar to those situations pop back up, you'll see it a lot with people who are married to each other or in relationship with each other. When they get triggered, they immediately flash back to those moments
mhm.
and they react from that perspective. And the beauty and the magic of reparenting yourself is taking time to notice when that happens and then giving yourself what you would have needed from your parents, but you taking on that role of a parent. And when you learn how to parent yourself and give yourself what you need, offer yourself the sympathy, the airs, the shoulder, the allowance to cry, right? They used to tell us, I'll give you something. What are you crying for? I'll give you something to cry for, meaning I'll beat you more on top of this beating to justify your crying, right? To give yourself that time to cry just because you're having a big emotion, just because you felt something that was scary, just because you felt under attack. This is the process of reparenting yourself. And when you come to understand these triggers within yourself and you come to understand the moments that you have need, it makes you that much more aware and attuned to your own children's needs. Because instead of doing the same that was done to you, like yelling at them, or one of the podcasts that you had did with another author, when the child was asking their parent about how they were going to get something from the grocery store, I think it was milk,
Mhm.
and the parent just yelled. It was like, that is absolutely not what you would have wanted from your parent. And it is absolutely not what your child needs in this moment. As parents, we offer our kids planet Earth. And so when they ask us about it, in as much as we know or can find, it is our responsibility to muster up that energy, that compassion, that knowledge, that information, and give it to our children. I always say, give them the answer, because that is what you would have needed as a child that you never got. And that's what you can now take the time and give to your child. So that also when you become old, they're not smacking you in the face when you have dementia because you can't remember stuff. Sorry, I just had to take it light there for a minute.
No, no.
But like reparenting is important, is looking in yourself and understanding how you can grow that compassion for a full, full human being who may not be physically 100% capable of conducting themselves through life. And then understanding the ways in which you can be their crutch, the way in which you can create the environment for them, the way in which you can lay out a table, a buffet of choices for them that they can partake in, rather than pulling the rug from underneath them because no one ever gave you the rug of opportunity.
No, and it's beautiful that you explain it that way, because what I'm getting from you is, when you talk about reparenting, because often you hear, even though my father wasn't there, I'm not going to do what my father did to me. And it's like a way, as a way to hold a grudge. And so the way I love how you explain is like, you have sympathy for your parents. Even though they weren't there, I understand why they were present, but they really wasn't there for me emotionally, because there were trauma that they dealt with at an early age. And so having that sympathy factor, I think is important, because now you don't have a grudge. You're not like saying, I'm not going to do what my parents did to me, to my child. And so you have this spiteful mindset that you're not going to do what your parents did to you, to your kids. But at the same time, by having that mindset, you're setting that example for your kid, because again, you have ill will to your parents, even though they weren't perfect.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear you put it that way, because I can see it. Like as you're saying those words, I can see it. I can see where my parents said, I'm not going to do what they did to me, and have that, like, that kind of headbutting with their parents, that
Yes.
moment where they're just like kind of going head to head with their parents in their mind in front of you. It's a battle of rebellion where that's a mindset of an adult who's still in that teenage phase where I'm not going to consider other people's feelings or what they're going through. And the burden of our generation, where this word becomes part of our lexicon of reparenting, means that we've got to look back and forward, right? We can't just do it for ourselves. We've got to understand where our parents came from, where that trauma originated, and then we have to look to our kids to say, how can I not perpetuate? How can I not, show this ill will? It's like when they say, oh, honor your father and thy mother, and it's like, but you don't do that. You know what I mean? Like, you're not
Yeah.
teaching us how to do that. You're teaching us how to get away, how to get away, how to get away, but also making it seem like you know better than the next man, not realizing we all dealing with something. We're all struggling with something. And as part being a member of this generation, we have to look back and forward to understand what they dealt with and what our kids could be dealing with today, and sit in the middle and not take sides and just be like, how can we address it as human beings? What do you need?
It's so true. It's so true. And I give props to this generation because this is the generation that's kind of figuring out what emotional intelligence is. And they don't give a lot of credit to this generation, which I give them all credits because to process trauma and then take a time to think it through and understand, like, all right, I don't have any ill will. I understand what you went through. I love you. But I'm not going to navigate that way.
Yeah.
And I think they don't get a lot of credit for that. So I just want to give credit to this generation for doing that, because especially in the age of social media, they get so much stuff coming at them left and right, left and right. And I've talked about compassion fatigue, like like all the time on this podcast. But let's go into the journey of creating this amazing children's book called Unschool Discovery. Talk about that journey of from creating this beautiful book.
Wow, the journey actually starts in my process of overcoming my trauma. So the book actually begins in New York, where we used to live, and it's about how we needed to flee. Like, I'd actually like to do a prequel, but the prequel would be like a horror story. It wouldn't be appropriate for a children's book. But it's where it all began. The crap that we had to deal with navigating the cops. The cops pulled me over one day in front of my house. Two people, hands on their gun, telling me move along. Baby in the car. I'm ready to take out the groceries to move them into the house, and they were like, "No, move." And
Wow.
it was like, if you don't move, we will pull these guns. Um, Coupled with that, deteriorating buildings and dark skies and just all the things that don't make you feel like this is a beautiful place to live your life. That's what we were dealing with in New York. And we just made a choice that this was not going to work for us and our family. And I think this is something that a lot of people don't understand, especially New Yorkers. Whatever it takes, we're going to get up out this. And a lot of people just feel like, oh, I'm strong. I can deal with the trauma. I'm strong. I'm going to deal with the struggle. And that was something that we came up against a lot in New York. People who were justifying their victimhood, people who were justifying and proud of their struggle and never wanted to move on from it because they felt like it made them a better person while still continuing to struggle. And I didn't want that to be my story. And I did not want that to be the story that I gave to my kids. I did not want to hear my kids, talking about how they interacted with the cops one day after the other. That's not the life I wanted for them. So the journey of creating the story is very much memoir. It is very much what we were dealing with and how our lives shifted when we moved to Texas, a place we were told we would get hanged. People wouldn't want us around. There'd be places where we couldn't go. All the things to scare us was completely the opposite of what we experienced. And when we got out to the country where we live now, and we have our own land and our own acreage and can grow our food, much like how it was done in the Caribbean, there came this time where you get so used to dealing with issues constantly back to back, that moment just wasn't there anymore.
Mhm.
Like, the next battle and the next battle, next battle just wasn't there. I remember driving in New York with major anxiety attacks. You see a siren, you see the cars, you see a cop, you start panicking, right? You can't control yourself anymore because you don't know who's going to harass you. I've been pulled over by taxi cabs. I've been pulled over by plain car cops who have raided my car in my ignorance, right? That creates a trauma that once we got here, we didn't have to deal with that anymore. It's like months would go by, you don't see a cop. Months
Mhm.
would go by, you don't see a person unless you wanted to see a person. There's no one outside your building screaming or cussing. There's no one fighting you for your very existence and their very existence sharing space. I mean, you have 900 people living within one block. That's 1 acre of space in New York. It's a lot of souls, a lot of minds. And for people who are empaths, they can feel all of that. So when I got out here, there was nothing. There was nothing to deal with. There was no new trauma coming at me. There was no, sirens and headlights beaming their way toward me. There was just peace. There was just butterflies. Like, I remember one day we saw 10, and then we saw 20, and then we saw 50, and then we saw a swarm of butterflies leave out of a tree. And that was the most intriguing part of our day, right? But in that it was the most intriguing part of our day, we got to learn that, like, there's more to life than fighting for it.
Mm.
There's more to life than trying to get through the next hour or trying to get through the next night to hope that you survive. And when I was going through my therapy, I needed something to do that just sort of like took my mind off of the therapy work, took my mind off of the traumas I was dealing with. And my partner bought me a tablet and said, "Do what you know." And I'm an artist. I've been an artist since I was a teenager, and I just started drawing. I didn't know what I was doing or why I was doing it. Just started collecting these memories, sketching them out and putting them together. And it took about 2 years, but when I sort of woke up after that 2-year period and therapy was really, really working, I realized that there was this part of me that left behind the story of how much we'd overcome, the story of the life that we were able to build for ourselves that we never thought was possible. We've just been fighting and hoping and fighting and hoping. And when I looked back at it, I realized, oh crap, we did it. Like, this is real. It felt like it was a gift. And that's really my journey of creating this book. I don't think it's like any other story I've ever heard of an author creating a book where, like, they thought about the characters or they thought about the plot. It was a gift that therapy gave to me and a story that I wanted to share with other people, that you can make a choice. You can make a choice that works for you, even if it means leaving your old life behind so that you can find something better for you and your children. You don't have to deal with the BS that you think life is.
And I think it's interesting that you said that, because you have a lot of people that say that your environment dictates your future. If you're in a bad environment, in a way, it dictates what you gonna be in your adulthood, and you are the reverse of that. So, like, what do you want to say to people who say that often, a lot? And I know you hear it all the time.
I say to them, make a choice. And whatever that choice is that you want, reverse engineer it. Don't worry about your environment. Don't worry about your block. Don't worry about your family. So many people don't make choices for themselves because of what their family would think or because it means leaving your family behind. Make a choice that works for you, and you'll never have an unhappy day in your life.
Definitely. And then also, what I love about your book is that you made the choice to make nature. I know we talked about off camera, but you made the choice of making nature make nature an important character in the book. So talk about the importance of nature as one of them. Make a focus point in the book.
Mm. I mean, nature is all that surrounds us, right? How do I put that into words? Nature, it speaks to us. It dances with us. It plays with us. It entertains us. It's always amazing to me that you can look at the world, right, with like these wide angle lenses we call eyes, and see this vast sky and sprawling landscapes or cityscapes. But then you can also take your eyes and focus them on the littlest things. Like, I've watched ant wars, right? Like, the littlest of creatures speak to each other and speak to us, right? And they ask us for what they want and need, and we work together. I'm writing a new version of the book now, and it talks about how we feed our rabbit and then he eats and then he poops and then we take his poop and we put it in our food. And it's like, whoa, what kind of nastiness is that? But it's like, that's life, right? Like,
Yes.
nature is this constant reuse and recycling and sharing that when you're dealing with trauma, you don't think about reuse and recycling and sharing. You think about me. What I got to get for me in this moment. What do I got to get to survive, right? And sometimes when we're working with nature, it means that we need to sacrifice. Like today, I went in my garden and I did some chop and drop. I took some beautiful green foliage and I thanked it. And I thanked it for what it was going to offer to the rest of its brothers and sisters in the garden. And I
Mm.
laid it out, right? Because some of the soil was dead. It wasn't
Yeah.
interacting with the world around it. And so I needed to add some life to it. I needed to add some decomposition to it. And so nature being a part of the book is, I think, weaves into the story of this constant learning, this constant interacting, this idea that, like, where school says you have a start and an end, life says it just keeps going. You
Mm.
might learn 10% today, 1% tomorrow, 5% the next day, but you're going to always keep going. And as a permaculturist, as a permaculture practitioner, we learned that what we learned last year don't mean shit this year. Right? Sometimes we've had snowstorms, ice storms, we've had drought, we've had monsoons, we've had earthquakes, we've had tornadoes, you name it. There's been always something, nature interacting with us in some way, shape, or form. And we just learn to live with it. We learn to interact with it, not hate it, not ask it to be different, but learn how we can learn from it. Like, what do the different seasons mean? How does it give Earth a chance to rest? How does it give Earth a chance to revive itself? How can we do the same and mimic nature so that, just like the birds who have everything that they need, like I listened to a child say one day, like, Mommy, I wish I could be like the birds because they have
Mm.
everything they need and nobody asks anything of them, right?
Yeah.
And this is a child reacting to their parents constantly wanting things of them. And there's, I just want to be like the birds. When we look at nature and we mimic nature, we understand that in the winter, it's time to rest. Like, just chill. Stop trying to do everything. It's gonna come. There's a time for that. It's called spring, right? In the spring, we get to work and we do things. And there's even
Yes.
a point in time in spring where you just gotta stop and know that you've planted your seeds, you've done all the work that you can do, and now you gotta go enjoy life in other ways, right? Enjoy the blossoms, enjoy the birds, enjoy the butterflies, enjoy what's coming up until the next season comes, which is the next season of working, of harvesting, of resetting things. This is nature. Nature offers us these opportunities not only to learn in a way that's constant, but also to, like, just chill and take it in and just be with it. You know what I mean? Not always be on the run.
No, no, I agree with you 100%. I think the beauty of nature is when we talk about free will as human beings, I think when you talk about nature, it's like, when you talk about like the birds, like they know their purpose and they're content with it. As human beings, we use that word content as a bad word. Like,
Mm,
we settle for things. Maybe it's not just settling, maybe it's just they're content. People are just content where they're at. Maybe they don't want the big mansion or the big cars. Maybe they want a simple way of life where, their bills are paid, they're happy, and they're enjoying their life.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That is such an important point that you bring up there about the word content, because that's a word that I've been struggling with over, how am I on, like, 30 some odd years? Like, I have hated that word content
Yeah.
because it meant giving up. It meant not being the best. And as a woman of color, as a queer woman of color, there has always been this, you've got to be a certain way. And if you're not this way, there's something wrong with you, or you're not worth being alive. And again, as a person of color, not worthy of being alive has a really deep meaning when you're constantly being chased by the police for little things, right? Not like you went and committed crimes against humanity, but
Right.
because you exist, it's like it's a crime. And so to always constantly be under the marching orders of be somebody, be the best kind of somebody, be the most ideal kind of somebody, and then still have to beg someone for your livelihood while being the best.
Yeah.
Content was definitely a curse word. But when I started to feel content, I started to feel happiness in boredom. Like happiness is not an exciting feeling, right? It's
Right.
not like being in the amusement park. It's just sitting down and noticing that you want for absolutely nothing. And sitting down and realizing that I don't want to do anything right now. I don't want to fight for the next thing or the next opportunity. I just want to enjoy what I have. It doesn't mean that you're a loser. It doesn't mean that you're not living your best life. And it doesn't mean that your child who knows content is not going to be able to live a full life. I think that's like our biggest fear with the
Yeah.
word content is like, if I let my child be content, what kind of life will they have? Am I
Yeah.
being a good parent to them? Will they seize every opportunity available to them? First off, everybody can't take every opportunity. You have to know
Yes.
when to say no. So content being a word we're content with. Ooh, that's a big one.
No, I feel you on that 100%, and that's why I wanted to put that in the conversation. Um, but the one thing I want to talk about is, I'm not a big fan of the word diversity, because it puts people of color in boxes when it comes to representation. You see it in movies, you see it in music and things like that. So I want your feeling on diversity, but also just talk about the two kids in the book, Danielle and David. Just kind of mesh, the question I asked you, but also just talk about the two characters in the book.
Okay, so when it comes to diversity and the negative parts of it, I completely understand your perspective that it creates stereotypes or that the way diversity is approached is used as a stereotype. I was working within a tech company last year that was striving to be diverse. And so they brought me in and they got funding. They got $3 million in funding just because they brought in someone with a vagina and brown skin. They had diversity, right? Um, for me, I saw it as an opportunity. I saw it as validation for the work that I was doing, that I was capable of. But in the end, the way it ended, I realized it was none of those things that I thought and hoped it would be. It was they got a $3 million check on my back for my
Mhm.
very existence. And so that did not feel good because diversity for the sake of having the word present isn't real diversity. And that sucks. And it sucks when we see stereotypes or we have Netflix remakes of things that shall not be named, just being put out there in the world to say that we have checked a box. What are we, 10 years old? How are we still dealing with these same shits? Like, I mean, Recess was a cartoon we watched growing up.
Yes.
They had diversity. We called it a token. Even South Park had token, right? um that's not diversity, and when it's interpreted in that way, it 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 waters down the word. It waters down the meaning of what it is to have diversity. And when it comes to Danielle and David, it's important for me to have those characters shine, not for the sake of checking a diversity box, but for the sake of having inclusion of two kids who are not black children, who are not African American children. These are Arawak children living in the countryside of Texas. It's not a story that I can name a book right now. I'm sure you can't name a book right now where you would see such characters with such a heritage in such a place living such a life, right? It's not diversity in any check marks whatsoever. There's no box that fits what they are representing. One, they are like, the next book is about Trinidadian cooking, right? These are
Mhm.
brown kids who eat curry and roti and dal puri. They don't eat fried chicken. They don't drink soda. They don't know what a quarter water is. So they don't have experiences that we would stereotypically assign to Black experiences. They also don't live in a city. They don't live in an urban area. They don't listen to hip hop, not because they don't have access to it, but it's just not what they love. They love something else. They're more eclectic. Their experiences of pastimes isn't try to be the best athlete to get a scholarship. to be somebody in life, right? Their experiences are very different. It's one where when I was growing up, taking time to interact with nature would get you called a nerd, or you doing white people stuff, all these derogatory terms. And these are just kids who are making choices for themselves. It's not what their parents tell them to do. It's things that they're genuinely interested in, that they want to do. I offer my kids opportunities all the time, and they'll straight up say, look me in the eye and be like, no, mommy, that's not what I want, right? Like, if it's not science, I'm not into it.
Right.
Not to put a stereotype on them, but they know what they want, and I'm not trying to push anything on them. And I think that while this is just book 1, I'm excited for book 15 and the young, the YA versions of these stories will be, because it's going to be something completely off the charts, because
Right.
nowadays you have books where there are kids dealing with bullies, dealing with stereotypical situations, dealing with emotions and feelings that are placed on them from being put in a box of, this is how you have to be. And those kids are navigating the boundaries of their box. These kids, Danielle and David, they're not navigating how to fit into the box. They're navigating the entire world around them and the possibilities of what can be. And I don't have words for that. I don't know how to classify that in any way, shape, or form. It's just, we don't know what will happen. And we also know that we can't assign any level of stereotype to these children, to these characters, because they never existed in the media, in entertainment, in literature ever before.
And my last question, I asked this question to a previous guest, a couple of years ago, the first year of Juneteenth, right? And I'm going to pose a question to you. with Juneteenth coming around the corner, what does it mean to be a Black woman and a queer creative when it comes to June 19th?
Honestly, I don't know. I've never been asked that question before, and I've never really thought about it, because I never knew what Juneteenth was.
Mm.
Juneteenth, as a person who, again, Caribbean background, raised back and forth between the Caribbean and New York City, Juneteenth was never a thing. We never heard of it. I didn't hear about Juneteenth till 2020. And to see it take such huge hold in the country and be taken seriously, I think it matters, because it points out the fact that when we thought slavery had ended,
Right.
it never truly ended. But I think it's important to reflect on the fact that slavery never ended. Like, Juneteenth isn't the end of slavery, isn't the complete end to slavery. It's never ended. It's still constitutionally legal. And because of the jury system in this country, because of the legal system in this country, because you have states that are trying to outlaw parole in this country, slavery still exists. And it exists in many forms. And it affects different cultures of people migrating here in different ways. And as a queer creative, I think that matters, because we all have experiences that the wider world wants to hush,
Mm.
right? The wider world wants to say this group of people is capable of X and not capable of Y. And I live in a world mentally where I think I'm very privileged, because I don't hold those ideals to be true.
Mm.
I don't suffer from those ideas. I don't suffer from what it means to be a woman. I don't suffer from what it means to be any box that anyone would want to put me in. I think very differently from other people. And because I'm able to think outside those boxes, it scares people. It really does. I've met a lot of people who don't know how to think outside of that box that's been created for them. And so I actually feel responsible to get up and work every day. not from a workaholic perspective, but to jot down a few more words, to share a few more ideas, to pave another path. I really hate that everything I've done, I've been a pioneer, but at the same time, I've learned to embrace that pioneer energy because there are many roads that need to be paved for many different people to feel like they matter in their own life, in their own existence. Um, so with Juneteenth around the corner, I just think it's a reminder that one, slavery never ended the way we think it ended. And with Pride Month and everything, I think also it's a call to action. It's a call to respond. It's a call of my responsibility to keep sharing these weird, different, strange, philosophical, anthropological ideas that I have so that people can begin to see, hey, there's a whole other way. It's not just the way that we've been taught. It's not just the Anglo-Christian way. There are other things. We were speaking earlier about statistics and census and data and facts, and all that shit is fucking skewed. You know what I mean? Like, it's one person taking information and filtering it through their bias and writing it down on paper, and we call that a fact. But it's not a fact when we don't take into account people's different lived experiences and how they create the life that they want to live or try to navigate the boxes that they're forced within. And we're getting to a point in human history and human experiences where we have the privilege of navigating those nuances because we're not starving for the most part. We have food in mass for the most part. We have shelter in mass for the most part. We have comfort in mass for the most part. So we can begin to look beyond our basic needs and start to look at other things like how are we really treating ourselves and how are we really treating each other, and life is not just about the next dollar that you can make, it's something else to it.
No, I think that's a perfect way to end the podcast. Um, because loving yourself is a radical act. Because some people think loving yourself is a form of being conceited, and it's not
Mm.
that fact. Like, how can you pour into other people if you can't pour into yourself first? And what you're doing with the book is amazing. I'm a big fan of the book. I love the book. I think it's imperative people read the book. It's not just for kids, it's for grown ass folks too. If you like really dig deep into the book, you'll find so many gems in the book. Um, Danny, Oliver, how can people find you?
Oh, they can find me on social media through Unschool Discoveries and Unschool Pages of Our Lives. Unschool Pages of Our Lives is on Instagram, it's on TikTok, and we also have a podcast. So you just Google it and you'll find me one way or the other. I'm out there.
Definitely. The links will be in the description below. And quick question, what can people expect by listening to the podcast?
Oh, a slice of the unschooling life. So it's basically what unschooling could look like for you
Mm,
when you just let go of all the confines of school and just let the questions flow, let the curiosity flow, and help your kids seek the information that they want so that they can grow.
definitely. I hope I did this with you with this conversation we had, and also the listeners who listen to the podcast. Hopefully I did my job and did my part. Again, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And we're out. Peace.
See you later.
All right.